we talk about startup. Searching out the people business model typically starts with, an idea. You're formulating your business model. I have this idea that I can do this to satisfy some customer needs, and I can do that at a cost that's less than what their customers will pay, because it's going to be profitable. So you're formulating that, you're talking to customers, but you haven't actually done anything yet. And then you move into, okay, let's create a prototype that demonstrates, my minimum viable product, something that actually could serve that need. And then I might take that MVP, a minimum viable product, and do a couple of customer pilots. Hey, would you try this out? Does this solve that problem that you and I were talking about? And then you go from a couple of successful pilots, maybe half a dozen, successful reference customers, and you've got good recognizable name customers that love your product, and you can say, great, I can do a commercial launch and say, hey, I've got here in the Sacramento region, Sacramento Kings are using it, or City of Sac is using it, or some of these kind of really referenceable names, and you do a commercial launch. And that's frankly where you get your first repeatable revenue. You're a couple phases into the process, maybe a couple of years, depending on what segment you're in. And after that launch, you might go to business expansion. Great, I'm serving the Sacramento region, now I'm going to expand to the Bay Area, and LA, and Atlanta, and Chicago, and New York. And I'm covering the US. And maybe going to go global at some point because there's people in Israel and the Netherlands or somewhere else. And at some point I reach maturity. I'm no longer a startup. I'm in that a God or people business model, and now I'm just making it work. And you might have an exit to a larger company, or you might go with a public IPO offering. For investors, exit means liquidity. They put in money up front, and at some point they want to get money back out. And so you need to have some sort of a liquidity event for those investors, or it was really philanthropy on their part, donations versus investment. The challenge of financing a startup is the expenses start here. And as we talked about, the repeatable revenue starts here at commercial launch. And there can be a lot of money spent. If any of you are in the medical device, medical therapeutic, or whatever, sometimes there's a 7-year FDA approval process that is frankly not after prototype, but it's after, like right here, and then 7 years later you do commercial launch and get your first dollar of revenue, your first legal dollar of revenue, because you can't sell unlicensed medications or therapies or whatever. So how do you fill that 7-year funding gap? I don't invest in medical therapeutics precisely because of that reason. It's just, it's rolling the dice and not knowing for 7 years whether there's anything behind it or not. And lots of things die in that approval process, the customer process. So the way you fill that gap is through funding sources. Now the best one, of course, is customer revenue. But as we talked about, customer revenue starts at commercial launch and beyond. So if you're not at commercial launch, you don't have the access to the customer revenue. Okay, and so it's a combination of grants, debt, or equity. There are grants available, we're not going to go into that today, but all the federal agencies that do research, National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, USDA, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, there's 12 federal agencies, and they all do small business innovation research grants. And in another life, I wear many hats. I'm an advisor to a number of companies that have won federal SBIR grants, particularly for the USDA, given I've got a focus on agriculture. But there are maybe 50 or 100 grants given by the USDA every year to small businesses. They have to set aside by law a certain amount of funds, of the research funds, for small businesses, and they do these SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Grants. All the other federal agencies that have research dollars all do the same. So there are grant opportunities at the federal level. There are grant opportunities at the state level. There is the California Energy Commission has grants available as well. SMUD has had grants to small businesses on topics that are of interest to SMUD here in the Sacramento region. The City of Sacramento has a Rails program. So there's lots of individual grant programs that are available. Don't bank your whole business on that, but when the money aligns with the focus of your particular startup, something to be considered. Debt is another form of capital. Unfortunately, for most tech-based startups, when you talk to people who provide debt, it's banks or it's other lending institutions. They want to see typically 3 years of financials with the last year being profitable. That assumes you're already into the commercial launch and revenue phase. And so there's not much debt available for startups. You don't have much collateral as well. Because you've got your idea, you've got your laptop maybe, and that's it. That's the whole business. And so not necessarily as successful. So the only thing left is equity. Equity is using other people's money, but those people now own a piece of your business. So you have to have a business and you have to have the mental, aptitude as an entrepreneur to have partners in your business who own a piece of your business, who have a joint stake with you in the success of that business. And there's consequences that come along with that. You have to take your business seriously, like other people have, and it gets to be an interesting relationship if your interests diverge from those of your investors. But there's a lot of startup companies that say, I'm going to use equity, I'm going to drive it, and I'm going to get to commercial launch and make a successful business. And those are the types of entrepreneurs that we as investors love to work with, because they understand who we are and our needs, and we understand them and their needs, and we go. So the typical funding landscape, again, taking that model from idea through commercial launch through maturity, there's lots of entrepreneurship programs, grants and competitions up front. The big banks, for example, can give over $100,000 away this spring to a variety of startup companies. I think some of their prizes are as much as $10,000 each, and you can win multiple prizes. So there's lots of opportunity with grants and competition. It's not equity, so they don't own your business. They're just giving you a grant. In terms of equity funding sources, the very first source for most entrepreneurs is friends and family. We'll talk about what is it that makes friends and family. I mean, they know you, they like you, they might have an interest in helping you be successful. And they want to see that there's a financial opportunity, some opportunity at the upside. The next step for many startup companies is angel investors. Angel investors might be investing small amounts of money, but they aggregate together in groups. We've had funding rounds where we've closed, companies, small businesses have closed $600,000 to $700,000 through, 2 or 3 different angel groups investing together. Friends and family are usually good in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. You've got, a couple of wealthy aunts or uncles who might write a check because, hey, they like you, you're their niece or nephew, and they feel for you. Angel investors are not family. They're investing because they want to see a financial return, but they can aggregate together to give you, again, something perhaps under $1 million in terms of a fundraising grant. When you get into larger amounts, as you get closer to commercial launch or past commercial launch, you're looking to expand, you talk to some venture groups here in town, or there's a lot of venture capital groups in the Bay Area that have invested in Sacramento-based startups, and they can write checks of $2.5 million, $5 million, $15 million, and upward from there. And there can be multiple rounds with venture capital. You might have a Series A, a certain amount that you raise, $2.5 to $5 million. You might have another following round that raises $10 to $15 million, and yet another round after that. Again, venture rounds have created some of the unicorns you hear about in the Bay Area. They're $1 billion in valuation, and they're raising $300 million at a pop. That's really not venture. That's almost like later stage private equity, but it has that same feel to it. There's also corporate venture groups that can get involved in certain technologies, sectors, or industries. In the medical field, for example, in other areas, you might see large corporations that are starting to step out of, we do all our R&D in-house. They're starting to use open innovation and invest in startup companies that are doing things aligned with whatever their corporate strategy is. Let's say it's a medical firm, and you might invest in some early stage therapeutics, and they'll see how those go through their first early rounds, and they might buy the company or have a relationship, a contract agreement with it at later stages and take it through that 7-year FDA approval process, because I've seen it go through its paces. And then after the corporate or venture capital groups, there's many different opportunities for maturity and exit. It might be an initial public offering, it might be a sale to a larger corporate strategic company that is involved in that same sector, or it might be a sale to a private equity firm. There's been a lot of active private equity firms in the market in the last 5 to 10 years. Yes?
I was just going to say, have you done crowdfunding at all?
We'll talk about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding has a hard time following this model. Crowdfunding might work here, at this stage where you have prototype proof of concept. The challenge with, if you have a company that's been crowdfunded for its early phases, if you've raised a lot of capital, you really have a complicated capital cap table.
But it's legal.
And that becomes an obstacle when a larger corporate venture group wants to get involved. They look at you and say,
It's messy.
it's messy, and there could be like legal liabilities because of the way you raise the funds up here. And the laws there are a little bit, they change a lot. Again, we'll talk about that later in the presentation. I would caution you to use it appropriately. We have, as angel investors, invested in startup companies that have raised money through through crowdfunding on Indiegogo or some of the other crowdfunding sources as a way to prove that there was a market. Especially if it's a consumer product, it's a small ticket like $100 or $200 for a consumer product. You can pre-sell your product on these crowdfunding platforms and demonstrate that there's a market for. In this case, it was illuminated bicycle lights on the wheel of your bicycle.
I heard of that. Okay.
And it was a great way to prove, hey, this concept is interesting. We did a program on whatever platform, and it demonstrated there was interest. And so we took that as, okay, that's market proof. If you raise equity capital, because now crowdfunding rules have changed, you can actually not just pre-sell a product, which is a commercial transaction, you can sell equity, which is a securities transaction. Then again, dicey, messy in terms of the legal rules are unclear, and I think it just creates a lot of challenges farther down. Farther down, as you get more mature, people say, well, yeah, you got this like toxic equity on your books. They would steer clear. So we talk about understanding your investors, different types of investors. At the root of it, investors they're just another customer. You're used to selling your product or service, whatever your product or service is, and you know all about understanding your customer and what their needs are and what their pains and gains and how do you address those. Well, when you're selling an investment, it's a product. And you need to understand who are the investors, what's the job to be done for investors. If it's friends and family, the job to be done there is they're just trying to help their niece or nephew be successful. If it's a venture investor, they're investing other people's money, and their professional job is to get a return on that other people's money, on their limited partner's money. And their way of getting return is investing in fast-growing, interesting startup companies that are going to yield a return. So the job to be done there is you need to show that you can demonstrate return, in an earnest fashion. And they're going to take a lot more professional interest in how your business can grow than Uncle Betty or Aunt Betty or Uncle Joe. So understanding your investor and their mindset is important because what you're selling, the package, the value proposition when you're selling investment is the opportunity to get a return. Investors make money by purchasing an equity at one price and selling it at a higher price. And that seems like, basics. But investors get it wrong frequently. And this was a study that was done in 2007 by an individual who worked very closely with the Angel Capital Association, and his work is published. Robert Wolfgang has done a follow-up study also in 2016, but this is data from 2007. About half of the investments that angel investors make don't have a sale price higher than the purchase price. It's really hard to do. And this is after all the investments the investors looked at and turned down. These are the investments that they said, yeah, that has an opportunity to make a return. Half of them go to zero. Another half might return, the 1x to 5x means I invest $100, I get $100 up to $500 back. The 5x return is not bad, but I only get that on maybe 3 out of 10 investments. And then maybe on an investment or two, I'll get something better than a 5x return. I might get 5 to 10x on one, and maybe one will get maybe a 30x or 15x or something. Now here's the math. If I make 10 investments and I get a 10x return on one of those, I paid for all my other investments, right? And if I get a positive return on 2 or 3 more, that's net gain. If I don't get a 10x return on one of those 10, and they all go to 0 or even return 1x, I've lost money. Half of them will go to 0. I've got to make up enough on the other half of those investments to pay for the ones that go to 0. So investors in this speculative, high-growth, scalable startup space are looking to get a 10x return. And they know of the ones they are convinced are going to give them a 10x return, 5 of those will go to 0, and another 3 or 4 are not going to underperform. So they're looking for investments that have the opportunity for a 10x, maybe even a 30x return. And if you're talking about, Cousin Sue with your nail salon on 5th Street or something, there's no way you're going to get a 30x return, right? If you're lucky, she'll be profitable and support her family, but that's not a 10x return. So investors are really determined in this, again, speculative high-growth startup space, determined to look for investments that can really go big in a significant way. Not just break even, not just kind of struggle along, but they've got to go big in a big way, or the math doesn't work. If I took 10 investments that had the possibility of getting 2x each, and half of them fail, there's no way I can break even or make any kind of positive headway. So you've got to understand the investors are looking for that really big, outlandish return, and if you're not talking about something that could yield that, they're going to become disinterested. Because investors get so many failures, they're looking to reduce their risk. Now, they know this is a very high-risk space, but they're looking to reduce their risk. And the risk comes in four buckets. Technology risk. Does that product work? Does your concept, does your idea even function? Will it scale? Hey, look at a test tube. Well, let's try it in a beaker. Oh, we've got problems here, but we finally figured out how to make it work in beakers. Well, does it work in something that's like 30 liters? And if it turns out I need kilotons of capacity, this is back in the clean tech days where people are trying to turn algae into oil, into petroleum, products. It worked great in the test tube, it worked great in the beaker, but the idea of scaling to, I gotta do thousands of tons of this per year to make any kind of headway in terms of profitability, it just doesn't scale. And growing algae in these huge vats, again, you're gonna have proper mixing of nutrients and everything else, it did scale. So, will it scale? Will it be competitive? I can make it work, and it'll be the best, cleanest biofuel at $30 a gallon or whatever. And gasoline is, $3.99 or whatever. It's just gone. So it's uncompetitive. And guess what? In the whole clean energy space, oil was at $100 a barrel, going to $150, and suddenly it was at $50. So it really took the earth out from underneath it. And the other thing is, will it become obsolete? I worked for the first part of my career in information technology. We were number 2 in the Ethernet networking space. We had taken Ethernet from 1 megabit per second in twisted pair to 10 megabits per second in twisted pair to 100 megabits per second in twisted pair. And then it transitioned to a gigabit per second in twisted pair to 10 gigabit per second in twisted pair. That was 5 orders of magnitude. And then when I left, they were looking at 40 and 100 gigabits for data center connections, again on twisted pair cable. 6 orders of magnitude improvement. There's about 3 years gap between each one of those leaps. And all of the component suppliers and little startups that were working on the magnetics and the other pieces of those and their connectors for that, for each one of those phases. If you got in there first as a small company, and the big boys like Compaq and Hewlett-Packard and 3Com and others would choose your technology to design you into that next generation, you had it made and you had a huge business. But 3 years later, people talk about the next generation of technology, and some other company had run to the head of the pack, and they had invested in the right magnetics for that next generation leap. And the big company said, well, great, we'll choose this supplier of components for our next generation. And the supplier for the previous generation 3 years ago, who was at the top of the world, is now at the bottom and struggling to pay off their debts. And so you go through these waves of evolution. And investors, especially in fast-moving technology areas, are very conscious of what's the obsolescence scale. If it's a 3-year leap from one order of magnitude to the next, and you're 2.5 years in, guess what? Nobody's going to want to invest in your new great way to do what had been done 2.5 years ago. If you're working on the next generation, the faster speed, higher performance, greater density, whatever the tech was, great. But you really have to surf from wave crest to wave crest, or you're buried in a wash. Technology risk can be huge, especially if your business is technology based. The other half of that is market risk. I can build, upgrade something, and it'll be wonderful from a technical standpoint, but will customers value it? Will they buy it? Will they buy it from an untested startup that has no track record at all? Because guess what? As an entrepreneur, that's exactly who you are. You've never sold them before, you have no track record of someone using it successfully, and you need to find that very first customer. The second one is a lot easier than the first one, but the first one's tough. The third is easier. The fourth and fifth are even easier, and then it becomes skating along. But that very first customer has to be willing to buy from a small, unproven firm because they've got a problem they need to solve. You need to find that customer who's got a problem that is so pressing, that bleeding from the neck issue that I've got to manage it right now. I'll even try some untested startup's solution. And if you can't find one of those, if it's like it's not really a problem. After that became, well saturated, other people say, well, that tool can be used here, and I can do these other things with it. And it sort of cascaded out into a whole range of other applications. spending far too much time on this, but I want you to understand lots of questions that investors will ask about market risk and how big is the market, how pressing is the need, what's the value that customers put on that. And then you get to financing risk. I talked about that pathway for technologies to get to market. If you're in medical therapeutics, it's going to take 7 years, you need a lot of money. And yet I talk to startup companies that are in the early stages of medical therapeutics, and they say, but I only need this much money to get 6 months more worth of runway. So 6 months of runway, it's a 7-year process for approval, assuming you're ready to go into approval now. It's like sending somebody to the North Pole, and I can bankroll them to get from here to Nome, Alaska, and 100 miles north of Nome, Alaska. And then, of course, they freeze in the dark, unless they can find someone else to provide that funding from 100 miles north of Nome to the North Pole and then back. Nobody wants to send an entrepreneur to freeze in the dark. You want to make sure that there's enough financing that you'll have the ability to raise capital and get all the way to the North Pole and back, or whatever it is the mission that you're on. And so we look at what's the financing risk, how long is that valley of death, we call it, that gap between when expenses start and the revenue starts to roll in. If that valley of death is long and deep, then you need to have a plan for how you're going to finance that long and deep. And we're not going to provide the first round of financing if you don't have a plan to get that second and third round, and the credibility to say, I know where the money's going to come from, I know how to get there. Again, that's huge. Uncertainty about that valley of death. Uncertainty equals time. It's going to take longer. Time is money, and money means equity. You take more equity. You have to give up more to investors to get through that path. From an early stage investor, if you need to raise more equity, more time, more money later, that means dilution for me as an investor. And again, it reduces my motivation, my interest level. Huge. Of course, if you've heard a few things about investing in startup companies, it's management team, management team, management team. We talked to a lot of startup companies that have pulled together a management team from various sources that each seem to have interesting backgrounds and aptitudes. The question is, can they work together as a team? And they recruit the needed talent, because maybe they have the talent now, but they're going to need more talent later as they get into the go-to-market phases for their innovation. And the team work together, and they stay together. Nobody wants to write a check for a startup company, and then 6 months later they hear, well, the CEO left, and the chief marketing officer had a family issue, had to move to wherever, and now you've got the third in command who's running the company, and maybe has a whole different vision from the mission that you initially thought you were writing the check for. So, 4 big areas of risk. If you're investing in a cannabis business, there's a fifth that's called legal risk. If it's an international business, you've got global geopolitical risks. Generally, we as angel investors don't go there. These are the 4 we care about. If you have any other risks, we tend to, look at it a second and third and fourth time. But we'll get back to, as you start pitching to your angel investors, you want to orient your pitch to what have you done to reduce technology risk? Demonstrate your product works. What have you done to reduce market risk by having some initial customers on board? What have you done to really model your business so you understand the financing risk? The things that you can do as an entrepreneur to make that perceived risk lower for your investors is all key.
A question, John?
Yeah.
On that last slide?
Yes, John.
Do the risks depend on the space? So, for example,
Absolutely. Yeah, these are all situation dependent. If you're in the medical therapeutic world, we can already talk about certain risks that should. If you're in the ag and food world, that's a whole different set of customers and buyers. If you're selling business to consumer, B2C, that's one set of risks. If it's business to business, corporate business, or even small business, that's a whole different set of market issues. So it's very dependent on what your specific business sector, focus, and value proposition is. But no matter what those are, there are technology questions, there are market questions, etc.
Selfishly, what do you see for ag tech?
That's an offline discussion here, because you and I have talked about that. Ag tech is interesting from a couple standpoints. If you're talking to growers make one set of decisions. There's one planting cycle, typically, per season, per year. They plant in the spring and they harvest in the fall. And if you're selling planting tools and technology in July, they're busy, harvesting this year's crop, and they're not making decisions yet on what they're going to use next spring when they make their planting. So it's once a year. If you're selling mobile apps on the web, generally any one of the 52 weeks out of the year, there are people who might be looking to do, something new and interesting, and little clickbait on their images on their phone or something. Again, there's no seasonality, there's no cycling to that, so that creates a different set of risks and opportunities. Yes, John.
Is there anything considered based on passion and interest? I know from a business standpoint, numbers, I get that, but from,
Yeah.
is there any consideration for passion and interest? Is there any,
We'll get into that as we talk about how you speak to investors.
okay,
At the end of the day, the investor is making
right,
a business investment decision.
yeah,
So they care about these things.
absolutely, yeah,
You know, they want a management team
right,
that is committed, is passionate,
right,
but they can't invest solely in passion.
right.
I'm spending far too much time on I want to get to some of the other content because there's important content later in the discussion. When we talk about investment readiness, we'll cover this a couple more times, but basically from that first idea stage, you know, you're at readiness level 1 if you have a team and you've got first pass of your business model canvas, which we'll talk about that concept later, but you don't have any proof. You think you have an opportunity, but you have no proof. And if you validate the product market fit because you have customers saying, yes, that's exactly the solution I want, and you show me some mock-ups of screens or, you know, the kinds of things, the data that might come back from your solution when it's there, you might have a low fidelity, non-viable product that you've tested, and you've gotten, you know, assurance of your product market fit because you've got lots of customers that say, that's exactly what I need, when can I have it, I'm willing to write a PO for it. You're at a different level of investment readiness. If you have customers that are, you know, ready to pilot or try your product and they're making commitments, then you're at a higher level of investment readiness. And investors have a lot of intuitive assessment of how ready is this market and how, if you're at this very first level, how much time will it take to get you from here to investment readiness level 7. I was in the Netherlands back in December talking to some folks at an incubator at a university in Delft. And their course curriculum taught them investment readiness level, or technology readiness level, which is a close analogy of this. Here in the US, we don't really talk about technology readiness level. It was a concept that was developed by NASA and the Department of Defense to talk about new interesting technologies, but it's very, very appropriate to talk about it in the context of a technology-based startup. And again, in the US, we're not as familiar with that term, technology readiness level, but in other parts of the world, that rolls off their tongue. Unprompted. He said, well, I'm working on this technology, it's a TRL 7 or something, and I was just shocked to hear him say that. This makes sense because different investors are willing to invest at different stages of readiness. We'll talk about, for example, some of the venture capital groups here in the capital region will only invest when you've got a certain level of market traction from customers. Moneta Ventures is kind of their criteria. You need to have $500,000 worth of revenue in the last 12 months, or be at a $500,000 revenue run rate before they're even going to consider investing in a product. That's how they address market risk. They say, show me you've got customers willing to spend $500,000 on your product, now we can talk. But angel investors are willing to invest at an earlier stage. We might not be as selective in terms of companies. We want to know that you've got prospects, but we're willing to kind of give you more the benefit of the doubt and invest earlier. Friends and family know you, love you, might have some questions about your product, but they're willing to give you a little bit of capital up front to prove out your model. They're willing to invest earlier in terms of readiness. If you come in and you're already at investment readiness level 7, you've got a proven product in the market, and you're generating a certain amount of revenue, you can immediately jump to talking to VCs directly. But again, not every company has that luxury. So quickly, understand your audience, different types of investors, friends and family. I view it, we all see things through the filter of our own experiences. My background was in information technology. I just spent the last 7 years focused on ag and food technologies. I feel like I know those. I had exposure to some other areas like, therapeutics and human health. But I know enough that I don't know enough to really make investments in this space. So I steer clear of it. We've got other members of the Sacramento Angels that come from medical technology background. Some of them are licensed physicians, and they're doing technology innovation inside and their investment startup companies. So for them, a human therapeutics company might be something they're very familiar with. So risk is based on your familiarity with the subject matter and your assessment, your objective assessment of what are the risks of that. If you are unfamiliar with it, you're going to subjectively assess it. That's much higher risk. I don't know how that business works. I don't know who the key influencers are in that sector. I'm going to view that as a higher risk. So I'll tend to stay away from it. So familiar with the sector or industry, familiar with the entrepreneur, lowers perceived risk. That's why friends and family might be willing to invest in you. They don't know the sector, they're not technology astute, but they know you. And they know, hey, Mike's a hard worker, he's got some good stuff, I'll invest in him. And that's why friends and family tend to be that first phase of that first level of investment. Warm introductions, if you can get a warm introduction to a venture capitalist, that helps a lot because there's this, referential familiarity. I trust John. John said Mike's a good guy. Okay, I'll talk to Mike. I'll see what Mike has to say. I've never heard of Mike before. It's just coming in over the transom. He buttoned underneath your LinkedIn and whatever. I may or may not even take the phone call. Some investors may never invest in certain sectors. I'm unlikely to invest in human health and therapeutics. It's my whipping boy for the night. I've actually made investments, truth to tell, in the pharmaceutical human health world. They didn't turn out well, but that's how it works. Some venture groups have patterns of investment or not investing in specific sectors. Ag and food, for example, 5 years ago there were very few venture firms that would invest in ag and food. And so if you're an ag and food company going to 10 or 100 different venture capital firms, most of them would say, I've never made an investment in this sector before. Are you the one that's going to be the first? Again, familiarity lowers perceived risk. If they make 5 investments in the ag and food sector, and you might be the potential 6th, that's probably a much more likely prospect than someone who's never made an investment in that space and may never make an investment in that space. Lastly, the question of who's going to lead the investment versus who will follow. Often, companies who are not familiar with the space, maybe venture firms or other investors, will look to someone who is recognized as being knowledgeable in the space. Oh, well, if Joe or Roger or Kathy's investing in the space, they know a lot about that sector. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and I'll invest as well. There's a herd mentality that goes on. If you've got a bunch of followers, though, and nobody to lead, they're going to sit on the fence, they're going to sit on their wallets, and no one's going to write a check. So you need at least one investor who knows the space, who can be the lead and say, yes, I trust that, John or Mike or whatever, Sarah's technology will actually work. I'll make that investment, and then you might find other people jumping on board. It happens a lot in the angel world. It happens in the VC world as well. So let's talk through friends and family. They know you. Their perceived risk might be low. Individual angels, they make decisions themselves. They might be willing to take a flyer on, that's a really harebrained idea, but it might actually work, and I'll write a check, and I don't have to explain to anybody why I wrote a check for that really harebrained scheme. There's a herd mentality in angel groups, I know, because I've been part of them, where you might actually feel uncomfortable writing a check to make an investment in a company because your friends in the angel group will say, well, that was a stupid investment. That was common stock, not preferred stock. Or, the terms were wrong, or something else. And so there's a challenge in groups if you're really outside of the mainstream, outside the norm, where individual investors, especially super angel individual investors, might be very confident to say, yeah, I know it's risky, but I'll write that check, and I don't have to answer to anybody about it. I don't have to explain why I made that, that investment, good or bad. Venture partnerships are not investing their own money. All 3 of these are investing their own money. I can send my kid to college. My daughter goes to Northwestern. I write big checks every year. And I can write a check to college tuition, or I can write a check to you as an investor, as an entrepreneur. It better be a good investment. But it's my money, and it's something that comes out of my own pocket. Venture partnerships are not investing their own money. They're investing someone else's money, someone who has entrusted them with good decisions, proven decisions with a stable decision process, being able to explain why they wrote that check for this. So they tend to do a lot more due diligence. They take a serious professional interest in making sure they're not making bad decisions. So they're going to do really thorough due diligence. Again, these are people who are all basically volunteering their time, they're not being paid for their hours. So they might do more of a cursory due diligence. So venture groups are different. They make different decisions in understanding that, that customer buying model. The job they've done for all these is to make money, but they have other pains and gains. These have limited partners breathing down their necks. Why did you write that check to that company and you lost, half of my investment? And so they behave differently. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, they're just different. So understand that, understand this risk matrix. It will guide a lot of the experiences you have as an entrepreneur looking for investment. Angel groups in the region, Sacramento Angels are here in Sacramento. We have members from Davis, Colorado Hills, Roseville, Rockland, etc. We work with a number of other angel groups around the California region. We work very closely with the Berkeley Angel groups, the North Bay Angels. We've done co-investments with San Joaquin Angels. We actually oriented the calendar, the schedule for our Sacramento Angels meetings to be on Wednesday evenings. On Thursday evenings, Sierra Angels have their investment meetings, so it's 1 and 2. Entrepreneurs who are coming from the Bay Area can do kind of a loop and get Sacramento and Sierra Angels together. We actively share leads. We actively share due diligence among our groups because most entrepreneurs come to us and they're trying to raise maybe $700,000, $800,000. They might find, a dozen investors from Sacramento Angels each writing a number of checks. Maybe it totals to $150,000, $200,000 for Sacramento Angels, but that doesn't close the round. So it doesn't help us to have an entrepreneur we've written checks to who hasn't closed their round. So we actively promote the deals that we like to other angel groups, including groups in the Bay, and they promote the deals that they're interested in to us because there's a good collaboration going on. And so through this combination of about 16 different angel groups and the Instinct Angel Network, we close a lot of deals and we get a lot of entrepreneurs funded. There's about 600 different angel investors, 600 individual angel investors represented through these 16 groups, and a lot of groups write significant amounts of checks each year. We do about $800,000 to $1 million of new investment each year just through the Sacramento Angels. Some of the Bay Area groups, like the Sand Hill Angels, can do twice or 3 times that. Of course, they get a lot more angel investors. It's a much denser community of angels in the Bay. But together, we fund a lot of deals. In terms of the venture group in the region, of course, the Bay Area's got literally hundreds of venture groups. There's a couple of different venture groups here in the Sacramento region who are more active than others. Moneta Ventures, who's a sponsor of Startup Grind, like for your sponsor. They're actively writing checks and making investments and negotiating deals. They're leading deals. Impact Venture Capital, I think has had an up and down. Jack Crawford and team, Aaron Anderson, they are writing checks. They're making active investments in companies. I've heard of Blacktop Capital here in the region. I don't know if they're actually writing checks or not, but I talked to Mariah in the back about Diversity Ventures, which is kind of still in the process of raising funds that they have ambition to be writing checks in the region. So Impact and Moneta are local. They actually tend to prefer local companies, so they'll give you kind of a little nudge if you're a local Sacramento store, but they also invest in companies from all around the Northern California region. And of course, venture capital firms in the Bay Area are investing, in some cases globally. There's been many investments in Davis-based technology startups coming out of the university, for example, that have gotten capital from the Bay Area. Capital from as far away as Hong Kong and Shanghai has come into our region for the right tech-based startup. So think broadly about your approach. Just to give you a sense for when you approach an angel group or a venture group, we all follow a similar process. So I mentioned the Instinct Angel Network, 16 different angel groups. They all have somewhat of a parallel process. They might have different mechanisms or methods, but entrepreneurs submit a pitch online. It goes to someone who reads through those investor pitches. By the way, we don't read 50-page business plans. So don't bother writing a 50-page business plan. No one has the time. We can get 25 or 30 applications for each of our investment cycles, and we can't read 25 or 30 50-page business plans. We look at a 10 to 12 slide deck, and we make some assessments based on that deck. First of all, the first assessment is, can in 10 to 12 slides, an investor make a compelling proposition that gets our attention? Because if you can't, well, that tells us you're not going to be able to, if you stood up in front of our investor group overall, with 10 to 12 slides, you won't be able to get their attention. So it really puts an emphasis on being able to convey thoughts and opportunities and ideas about market, about technology risk, and other things very plainly and simply in 10 or 12 slides and images. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the selections committee reviews the applicant pitches offline to decide which of those, of all the incoming ones, actually make compelling sense, seem like good investment propositions. And then we'll invite the applicant to have a live interview. It may be live over the phone, because we're very distributed from Rockland, from Elmwood Hills all the way to Davis, so we do a phone screen. Some of the Bay Area groups, which are more concentrated geographically, actually do live in-person reviews with the entrepreneur. And then they make the decision, we might review 3 or 4 online. We'll select the best 2 of those. That might be the best 2 out of an incoming pool of 30. And then we'll invite them to present to our membership, collective membership live, pitch their idea. But the very first thing that will be seen will be your investment pitch, and you won't even be there to give the voiceover. So don't just come up with fancy images of lambs and grass and flowers, because I've seen some of those decks. And I'm sure the investor would have given a great voiceover, but it didn't convey itself offline. When you actually can speak with your slides and get the voiceover, again, that's very compelling, and we can get all the nuances, but you have to have a deck that stands alone, otherwise I'm going to get attention. Your deck will be seen 3 or 4 times before you can get in front of our elected investor group to have them raise their hand and say they're willing to pursue it further into due diligence.
Yeah, so because Sacramento is such a new area to venture capital and really a budding area for startups and really trying to make its place known on the map, do you think, and have you seen personally, that it's easier or harder to raise capital through venture capital here in Sacramento versus in the Bay Area? Or is it going to be roughly the same? Or like how have you seen?
There's lots more investors in the Bay Area. There's lots more venture capital firms in the Bay Area. Here, there's a small handful of venture firms. There is, one meaningful, one large-size angel group, and that's it. And so don't rely on only raising capital, only pursuing capital here locally, because the Bay Area has just far greater depth and far greater number of potential investors. It is harder to raise capital here, but good ideas will find capital. There's smart money and there's dumb money. There's a lot of money in the Bay Area. I've seen a lot of firms funded there at valuations I just shake my head and say, cool, they found an investor. People that frankly we wouldn't find interesting to invest in. But you have to ask, are they getting dumb money or are they getting smart money? It's a challenge. We wish there was more capital sources here. We wish there were a lot more venture firms so that you could find people competing for, to invest in your business here locally. We're not at that stage of maturity yet. That's the truth.
Thank you.
After it goes through this process to an angel group, let's say a group invested in a couple of startups.
Right.
But you want to add, how do you?
So we like to, if we look at a company, maybe if the selection review decision, we can have so-and-so invest in us, or I'm going to have so-and-so present to us, sorry, using the wrong words, present to us at our next meeting. At that point, we'll start referring that entrepreneur to other angel groups within our community.
Is it more of a word of mouth thing, or do you?
It's selection committee manager to selection committee manager. And the challenge is, we got to this stage with you, for example, and we'll refer you to the Bay Area, to like the North Bay Angels, or Berkeley Angels, or the Stanford Angels, where you'll come in the selection process. And similarly, we got referrals from other groups that would go into the head of our selection process. But the good news is, that's a curated set. There's a lot of chaff that comes in here, and we spend a lot of time separating wheat from the chaff. When we get a referral from another angel group, it's generally a pretty solid group. And those referrals are the ones that have a very high percentage of going through to actually pitching in front of our investors. Whereas someone coming in over the transom without a referral, you're one of 50 different companies, and we're quickly weeding through the ones that don't make sense. A lot of chaff in that process. I'm pulling way behind. People ask about crowdfunding. We'll talk about Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Some platforms that you should be familiar with if you're working with angel groups are platforms like Gust or ProSeeder. Sacramento uses Gust. It's a free platform for entrepreneurs to use. We use that platform because it helps us manage. We get 5 different files or things from one entrepreneur. We get another pitch deck and 5 other supporting files from another entrepreneur. Gust is a platform that helps us to manage that collection of data very easily. As an entrepreneur, you create a profile and you have a set of materials, including pitch deck and other kinds of supporting documents, and that all can move together in this online platform. ProSeeder is a similar one. Of the 16 angel groups in our community, the Instant Angels, half of them use ProSeeder, half use Gust, and a few you might use something else. There's also online platforms like AngelList, allow you to reach out to individual angel investors. Circle Up Microventures, there's other different platforms out there. You should be familiar with those. But at the end of the day, you need to make a physical connection, touch the flesh. of a real life investor and angel. And these platforms may or may not allow you to make that connection. You should be aware of them, but don't bank your investment, your company, on any one of those coming through. We mentioned Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which are ways to kind of pre-sell, particularly consumer goods. If you're selling business to consumer and your consumer product is something that an individual consumer can afford to put money down for, maybe a $100 or $200 backpack or bike accessory or something else, those work great in Kickstarter. If it's a business-to-business product of $10,000 of investment or more, or it's a human therapeutic product, these are just not applicable for those kinds of technologies. So, what investors want to know? We talked about the types of investors, we talked about how you approach these investors, how you go through the selections process for those investors, what do they want to see, and what will you expect to share with them during due diligence? I'm going to go very quickly through this because I want to get to some of the other content that we have lined up on structuring deal and term sheets. But if you're not familiar with this business model canvas, it's a great book called Business Model Generation. Buy it. It's a great book. It's a great read. It talks about the 9 different things that make sense for your business. Any business can be defined in these 9 areas, and I've added a 10th. It's called competitors, because as an investor, I want to see that 10th table. But in the book, in the Business Model Generation book, it talks about the 9. And those are the key 9 things. What's nice about it is it's complete. If you can talk about your business in terms of your value proposition, your customer segment, your customer relationships, your go-to-market strategy, your revenue streams and costs, which define profitability, what are the key assets and activities, and who are your partners, you've covered everything about your business. You're not missing it. You're not leaving anything out. You know, a secret, I judge on a bunch of different pitch competitions. Friday I'll be judging in the Plasma pitch event over in Davis at the university. I drop a little diagram on a piece of note paper, and when they start talking, the first few slides of the entrepreneur starts talking about, just check out, okay, they've talked about value proposition, they talked about the customer segment, they talked about the go-to-market strategy, and they talked about the other things. They didn't mention anything about the cost structure. Guess what the first question is on my mouth when I'm asking questions? The things they didn't talk about. They didn't talk about it either because they didn't know about it, or they know a lot about it and don't want to talk about it because it's just a bad, it's bad. Often it's they didn't think about it because they're really deep in tech and they didn't think about their channels and their go-to-market. So they don't mention it. Again, that's my first question goes, hey, you didn't tell me about go-to-market. Talk to me about how you're going to reach your marketplace. And I'm not trying to undercut them, I'm just trying to make sure I have a complete understanding of what the business is. Because if they say, let me talk about go-to-market, and they got a really good solid story there, and they covered all the other areas, then I know, great, that entrepreneur really understands their business. But this is a great way for us as investors to check off, yes, they've talked about every aspect of their business. And the hint is for you as an entrepreneur, make sure in your pitch you cover these kinds of things. Because together these cover market risk, technology risk, financing risk, and people risk. Key resources is, of course, the management team and the other assets you have in the business. And that's important area. So very quickly, running through the entrepreneur pitch. We look at pitches at 3 different levels. You should understand the pitch is not just about the business. We want to hear about the business, but we're also evaluating you as presenters. We're evaluating what's the management team or the manager or the CEO who's pitching it. What is their understanding of the customer or the business themselves? Not just what's on the slides, but as they're conveying that passionate discussion about, I talked to a customer, they really have this problem, we can solve it, they're really excited and happy. And you demonstrate a deep understanding of the customer's problem and the business and what costs it will take to actually solve that customer's problem and how you can make it into a profitable business model. It's a proxy for, do they really have the depth of understanding? Because anybody can take the same slides and walk in front of investors. But only the CEO can really talk about it in depth and really understand all these aspects of business. Never send your chief financial officer in to give an investment in angel pitch, because it just doesn't, they don't have that understanding. They've got numbers, but they don't have the understanding of the passion of the business. And then we look at the CEO, how well are they at a communicator? They're selling an investment proposition to us, they'll be selling a product or service to their end customer. Can they sell? Can they speak to a set of needs and really address that? So it's kind of like a job interview for the CEO. And so there's 3 different ways that we look at that same pitch. At the same time, think about it when you're making your pitch. Are you covering the business? After covering this, great. Are you giving that depth of understanding to explain that you have its understanding of the customer marketplace. If you don't feel confident doing that, then go and talk to more customers and develop that understanding and that passion for what the customer problem is, so that you can address this. And then, often, all of these can be learned, by the way. None of these are, hey, I just don't have what it takes. No, you can learn this, but it takes practice and it takes focus. So let's quickly go through what we want to hear. We're trying to address market risk. So we want to hear about your customer segment and your value proposition. We're talking about market risk, we want to understand who specifically is the buyer. I've talked to too many entrepreneurs who say, there's a problem in this multi-stage value chain of 5 different, there's suppliers and growers, and then there's people who are processing food and then selling distribution, and then there's retailers, retail, and the consumer buys it. There's a problem across that chain, and we're going to solve it. And I ask them, well, who writes the check? 5 different businesses in a row might have a problem, but if no one of those businesses feels the problem, there's nobody to write a check to you. So you need to understand who's making that decision. It's not Rayleigh's, or it's not, in healthcare, it's not UC Davis Medical Center, it's a physician, or it's a technologist in the radiology department, or it's the insurer who's deciding what goes on their list of formulations that they will allow you to write prescriptions for. There's a physical person somewhere, somehow, making the brand decision for your brand. And by the way, that's an untested, never before heard of, first product, first article sold. And that person has to make that decision and feel confident in making that decision because they know that you're the only one who can solve that problem they have. But you don't find that by looking at a who's who of what's the corporate name. You look at individuals within that entity. It's a hospital, or it's a bank or financial institution, or it's a data center manager and wherever. Another part of market risk is the go-to-market strategy. There might be customers who really desperately need your solution, and you've got the solution, and they'll never hear about you. So how are you going to reach those customers? How are you going to create awareness, interest, give them information about your product, allow them to do trial or purchase, and then repurchase, etc. We can do a whole workshop on go-to-market, and we have. In terms of competition, you need to understand, yes, I can solve that problem, and there's 2 or 3 other firms that also believe they can, but let me tell you, they've got shortcomings, and here are those shortcomings. That is another part of the market risk. If there's 5 other competitors who are actually more mature than you, and you're the first entry with an immature, minimum viable product, again, it's a challenge. On technology, we want to understand what are you doing from the technology side, talk to us about obsolescence, talk about the pace of adoption in this market. From the management team, we want to hear who's the management team, who are your board of directors, who are your advisors. Are the management team working 100%, or are they all part-time, they're working their day jobs, and it's kind of moonlighting thing? As investors, we don't like to write checks for people who are just moonlighting because our money needs to go to work full-time, all the time. We want the management team that's driving that to also be dedicated to that. It makes a difference whether they're being paid with our cash, as investor cash, or they're working for sweat equity, and the next group of investors, or better yet, even customers, will be the first source of revenue that actually pays the staff that's working to launch this. And your team is currently working for sweat equity, just like our money's going to be working for equity in driving business forward.
We got 2 members of our team who are full-time sweat equity.
Yes.
Who have families and full-time jobs.
Yep.
And part of the reason we're considering raising is
so that everybody can at least make a living wage. Yes.
Yeah.
We understand that.
Yeah. How does that
We
fit
understand
into the
that.
equation? Yeah.
It's part of the conversation.
Cool.
I'm not saying these are lockout,
Sure.
but we'll ask the question, who's working for cash, who's working for sweat equity? I just want to know. Again, we've had people come to us and say, we're going to have a 4-person team and we have $1 million budget for our SG&A in the first year. And we looked at it and say, so explain again how that works. Oh, well, I came from corporate background. We're used to having big salaries. And we said, very much next. And we move on. On the financing risk, we want to see that you've really analyzed the numbers. Enough said on that. And so that covered management team, financing risk, technical risk, and market risk. That's what we're going to want to know in due diligence. Then we'll come around to structuring the deal. And especially where we are on timing. We've talked for say an hour and 15 minutes. We'll keep going. Structuring the deal, you'll hear about a couple of different vehicles that are out there. One of them is equity and then convertible notes. And there's a mix of, in terms of deals that come to us as Sacramento Angels, deals that come to Minetta Ventures and others, we see a mix. Equity is an ownership stake in your business. Right now, as an entrepreneur, when you first start, you have 100% ownership of that idea. You have 100% equity in that idea. As you start taking money from other investors, they will also have a stake of ownership in that business. And there's advantages for investors. There's a lot of tax advantages for investors because the U.S. tax law has, over time, gradually become more and more favorable to the idea of venture investing and starting up. So there are tax benefits in terms of capital loss provisions. So if I invest in you, and I'm the first $1 million that went into your business, I'm among that set, and your business goes bust, I can at least write that off in my taxes as an area, not as capital gain or capital loss. If I invest in your business and you go gangbusters, and I've held that stock, that qualified small business stock for 5 years, as an investor, I get a tax advantage. I can exempt some or all of those capital gains. So the U.S. tax law is steered towards equity investors, and so we prefer equity transactions. Pricing negotiations for equity offerings can be painful, particularly around valuation. I'll talk about why valuation is so important. But there's a lot of clear advantages. Investors prefer, by and large, priced equity rounds. And we'll talk about the terms around priced equity rounds. But an alternative that we see a lot of, especially in companies like today, are convertible notes. Convertible note is debt that ideally would be repaid, but most likely it'll be converted to equity in the next financing round. It's a way of deferring that whole painful pricing negotiation for the stock offering to the next round of investors. It's perceived to have a simpler legal paperwork because it's a simple agreement, promissory note. It avoids that painful pricing negotiation. The disadvantages for investors are numerous, and I'll go over those in a couple later slides. But basically, I talked earlier up front about investors make money when they buy shares at a certain price and they sell them for more. A convertible note, we rarely understand what the cost per share will be when it converts to equity, because it's going to convert to equity at some point down the road, potentially. And then at some point, even farther down the road, it might be sold. So we don't know what our buy price or our sell price will be. At least with the priced equity round, we know what our buy price is. We're halfway to understanding that. And again, tax benefits don't begin until it converts to equity, so it can be multiple years before that convertible loan actually converts to equity, and then it starts a 5-year clock on this capital gains exemption process. So it's really not favorable to us. Yes?
You said you did about 17 investments?
I made personally 17 investments.
How would you split the difference? How many equity, how many convertible notes?
I have to go back through. I've made a couple of convertible note rounds. A couple of them I invested in convertible notes because they were doing a price equity round, but they need money up front. So this was like a convertible note for 3 months or 1 month or whatever prior to going to an equity round. I've made bulk of them, probably 2/3 or more equity investments, maybe 3 or 4 convertible notes. My experiences, we won't go into it. I made one investment in a debt offering that was 5 years ago. It still hasn't converted. Haven't heard from the company. I don't know where that's going to go. I've made a couple of investments that immediately converted because it was like we're going to have a price equity round. It's going to close in about 3 or 4 months. We need the money up front. We'll give you a discount for the money up front, and then converted, and I was able to take advantage of the discount. So I got my equity actually at a better price because the note converted. We'll go into that. There's some other things you'll hear about. A safe note. A simple agreement for equity, that's what SAFE stands for. Y Combinator in the Bay Area, it's an accelerator. They really focus on safes. SAFE is not debt, it's not equity. It's more like an option. It doesn't have any of the shareholder rights, no investor protections. It's not debt, so debt at least has the opportunity in a bankruptcy of the debt holders take first rights versus the equity holders. So if there's a outstanding debt note, at least we have some claim. With a safe note, there's no claim at all. There's no debt, no enforcement provisions. Friends don't let friends buy safes. Which doesn't prevent entrepreneurs from coming to us with safes, but we try to steer them to at least a convertible note and often a price equity. Another thing you may hear about is warrants. Warrants are more like sugar sweetener, or maybe adding bacon to your salad. You know, things are better with warrants. What I've seen entrepreneurs do is they have, let's say, a convertible note, and if you invest in convertible now, between now and let's say end of April, we'll throw in warrants at some ratio, 1 to 10 or something like that. If you invest between April and May, we'll throw in warrants, maybe 1 to 20. And if you invest after May, there's no warrants. It's a way of kind of sweetening the deal, especially for pulling things in. Sophisticated entrepreneurs are able to use warrants in a very clever fashion like that. But warrants are never the primary investment vehicle. They're always like a gadget, or thrown in as a part of one. Question?
If there are so many disadvantages to safes, why have they taken off so much in the last several years?
We'll talk about, there's a perception they've taken off. They really haven't. I actually pulled up some data for 2017, and I'll talk about that later in the slide deck. 2% of all the venture investments in California in 2017. 2% were safes. I think 60-some%, we'll look at slides later on, were preferred equity grants, and the remainder, like 38%, were convertible notes.
Of that though, what was the early stage portion?
These are early stage investments. This investment, this is data from the Angel Capital Association of early first round angel investments. So safes exist because Y Combinator pushes that, and Y Combinator gets a lot of visibility and invests in a lot of startup companies. So people who come out of Y Combinator are offering safes as their investment vehicle, and we have a general cost. But I would not recommend you approach investors with a safe. I think you're going to have a much more compelling proposition if you come in with at least a convertible note, or at best an equity grant. What I've seen is people go to, for example, Meta Ventures, and they're offering a convertible note, and Meta says, I like your business, I'd be willing to invest to make an equity grant. And I've seen people say, well, I mean, an entrepreneur can pivot, right? Here's a customer who wants equity, and you're offering a convertible note, well, just, damn it, offer equity. They're not that different. A convertible note is equity that's going to be priced later versus equity that's priced now. And it's just one transaction, one form of a security versus another. But that doesn't stop lots of entrepreneurs coming to us and pitching convertible notes, or even pitching safes. We tell them, no safes, we've done some convertible notes, we prefer it, for all the tax reasons and everything else we talked about. I want to help you understand the language about investments, but you need to understand some basic things. Basic concepts. Pre-money plus new money in is post-money. It's simple math. You can't break this. This is a truth, like a truth table. There's no way you can somehow have pre-money plus the new money in not equal post-money. The same way the existing shares and options and warrants, add those together. Say you've got 1 million shares, options, and warrants outstanding, and you're going to issue 2 million new shares. Well, that's the total shares total, and the number of new shares purchased as a percentage of that total shares is the percent of equity that you're giving up. Again, simple math, and by the way, these numbers are the same. The share price is the new investment over the number of shares purchased, or it's also the pre-money valuation over the number of existing shares. That ratio is the same. Or the total post-money valuation of the company over the total shares outstanding after the financing. Again, the ratio is identical. Very, very simple math. It doesn't break. Don't try to push it. Don't try to think that there's some magic formula. These are very simple things. So when you watch entertainment on TV like Shark Tank, and they say, oh, I'll give you this much money for this percentage equity. Angel investors, venture investors don't talk about percent of equity. Percent of equity is the result of a calculation. It's all based on what's your pre-money valuation. You're coming to me, you want to raise $200,000, or $2 million, or $20 million. What's your pre-money valuation? Because you, the entrepreneur, define how much new investment you want. And then the only question is then, what's your pre-money valuation? So all the focus is on valuation, pre-money valuation. Once I know how much money you're raising in the pre-money, I know what post-money is. Once I know how many existing shares and warrants are, and I know how much money you're raising, I can figure out how many new shares you have to give me to make the ratios work out. So the key figures you need to understand is how much you want to raise. You know that. And what's your pre-money valuation? Well, that's a negotiation between you and investors. You may have a starting point for that. The investor will tell you it's really worth this. And you come to an agreement on that. I can't emphasize, these are very, very simple concepts, but you need to understand that as you start to go into, pricing, structuring a deal, and term sheets and everything else. The valuation of the company is not based on time. It's based on milestones, investment readiness, on a set of milestones. It's also dependent on the risks you face. You might be close to ready, but you've got a long approval cycle, your financing risk is huge, whatever. That's going to affect your valuation. So those are the two things, and we've already talked about those, that affect your valuation. I'm going to run through a very quick, very short, not like we did with Sacramento. We did a multi-stage round with Sacramento, 3 different stages of friends and family, angels and adventure. We're going to use friends and family here. So let's say you've created a C Corp, ABC company. Your family team has 6.5 million shares, and you've reserved as an option pool for those other entrepreneurs you have to bring on board, those other employees, 1.5 million. So you have a total of 8 million shares outstanding, and you think based on other companies you've seen that are comparable, your pre-money valuation is about $400,000. And you go out there and you raise money from your friends and family, cousin Bernice, Uncle Andy, whatever. You raise $100,000. Well, if 8 million shares equates to $400,000, that's what? 5 cents a share? If you want to raise $100,000 for friends and family, you're going to have to go up 2 million shares. That's the math. You'll have 10 million shares outstanding. You want to put post-money valuation at 400 plus 100 is 500,000. Very, very simple. Investors, as you saw earlier up in the slides, lose money on about half the deals they invest in. They don't like to lose money. So they want to prevent leakage of money. They put in money into your company, they want to prevent leakage of money going into other people's pockets and not going into your company. So by having dividend rights, by the way, the investment vehicle is a convertible preferred stock. Preferred means it has preferences, it has privileges, different from the common stock that you as the entrepreneur have. Those preferences are things like dividend rights. The preferred shares have first right to any dividends that are declared. One of the leakages, I put money into a company stock, and the entrepreneur says, well, I'm going to declare a dividend because I own 80% of those shares. Again, I only put in my share, I've got maybe 20% or less, as an angel group or as a higher community of angels. 80% is owned by the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur might say, oh, I'll just declare a dividend and give myself a big fat dividend with all the money that just came in. Investors don't like that. So they have a preferred stock. One of the preferences is that if any dividends are declared, it goes first to the preferred shareholders. That discourages the entrepreneur from declaring a dividend. In fact, some of the dividend rights may say you cannot provide a dividend to the common shares of more than X, and the preferred shares get at least that, if not more. So that's to prevent leakage. Another leakage is liquidation preference. Let's say there's a company, it's got no money in the bank, but it's got some good idea, $400,000 valuation. I put $100,000 in, and the company liquidates and says, okay, we sold it all off for $200,000, and we get the money. So my money went into someone else's pocket, not into the company as a growing concern. So investors put liquidation preferences that if you liquidate the company, I get all of my money back, 1x, or I get all my money back plus another 1x, so I get a 2x liquidation preference before any money goes back to the common shareholder. Again, the common shareholder, the largest common shareholder, is the entrepreneur. So before the entrepreneur gets money, if they liquidate the company prematurely, the money comes back to me as the investor, not to the entrepreneur. It's a way of preventing leakage of that. Yes?
Does that also hold true in a liquidity event?
It does.
So not just liquidation, but liquidity.
So
IPO.
there's concepts of participating and non-participating. If the company liquidates, and I've got a 1x liquidation preference, I get my money back first, and then the remaining money, let's say, it's a $400,000 pre-money, I put $100,000 in, and then it gets liquidated for $200,000. I'm going to get my $100,000 back, and then the question is, because I'm a shareholder, do I participate in the distribution of the remaining $100,000 or whatever that sum is? Or I get my money back, and then the rest of, again, the prior shareholders had a $400,000 pre-money, there's only $100,000 left to distribute. Do they share all of that, or do I participate? That's what participating means.
Even in a positive liquidity event, let's say.
In a positive liquidity event, the liquidation preferences still hold. There's a caveat to everything we'll get to that. So non-participating means that if I get my money back 1x or 2x, I'm done, I'm out, and then the other shareholders participate in all the rest. If it's 1x participating, which is common, I get my money back and then I share as a shareholder along with everyone else. It's like converting my preference shares, my preferred stock to common stock, and then I share in the proceeds just like any other common shareholder. What's common is 1x participating. I've seen 2x, but that starts to get a little bit you know, the investors are taking a little too much skin.
I saw 1.2 before.
Yeah, I've seen things up to 2x, but that, again, it starts to get a little lopsided in terms of favoring investors versus investors. Conversion rights. So I've got convertible preferred stock. You can convert into common stock. There automatic conversion upon certain events like an IPO. Typically in an IPO where the company goes public, all of the preferred stock, there might be multiple brands, might be Series C, Series A, Series B, they all typically automatically convert to common when the company goes public. Because going public, typically companies only have one class of stock at that point. It's the publicly traded shares, typically not preferred versus others. There might be mandatory conversion on an IPO or on some other financing event. Redemption rights are a way where the entrepreneur can actually pay money to buy their shares back from the investors. But the redemption rights typically have a premium. So you can buy my shares back at 2x what I originally paid. So I, as an investor, get some return. But entrepreneurs that are not sure they want to always have their company be owned by other people might want to have the option to buy it back. If the company goes up, you know, a certain amount, then they can buy that stock back at a premium. The investors typically will get a return, and the entrepreneur then owns more shares. I've actually not seen this in practice. It's theoretically possible. But if the company is actually getting to such a valuation where the entrepreneur wants to buy the shares back, the investors might say, well, I think it can actually go higher. Why should I sell it back to you at this ridiculous price? So, and you saw because of half the investments going negative, and I'm really relying on one or two to get a 10 or 30x return, why would I cap that return on the upside? I'm going to leave it uncapped so I can hope to get some positive return over in my net portfolio. Voting rights are big. You might see a preferred class of shares that say we want the ability to vote for and elect a dedicated Series A or preferred stock member of the board. So typically the board of directors and managing company would include the CEO and maybe a couple of other common shareholders. And the voting rights might say the preferred stock shareholders can vote and elect, you know, 2 other members of the board, a 5-person board or something. These are commonly held kinds of provisions. The next page, key terms, protective provisions. Again, we want to get that leakage. Leakage on change of control. So my preference shares and my other characteristics throughout change of control. We might define board composition. There's a dedicated board member for the preferred shares. Officer compensation. The officers of the company can't be compensated more than X without the approval of the board or without the approval of the preferred shareholders. These are things like almost similar to covenants you might see in a bank book. Vesting of founder stock. We don't want to put money in, and the founders say, oh, we got a big payday, and off they go, and then there's no one running the company. So they will have buyback provisions called vesting. The founders own the stock, but we have if they leave before a certain period of time, we have the option to buy back their stock at a fixed price and provide that stock perhaps to other entrepreneurs, other CEOs who might bring in to replace that founder. So that's what vesting of founder stock is all about. If you leave, you have the ability to buy your shares back. And it might not be at a high price, it might be at a low price. We want to give you that golden handcuffs. Voting rights, we talked about changes in rights and preferences and privileges. Every investor group coming in, every round you do, you might have preferences to that Series C shareholder, that angel group you went with. And then 2 years later, you're raising a Series A, and you've got a number of other bigger venture capital firms coming in. Any new money in can rewrite all those provisions, those preferences you just gave to the previous set of shareholders. I've seen it done. It happens. Again, it's sometimes ugly. It's never a pretty thing. So there might be certain provisions in the terms about the changes in those preferences. But I've seen all of those rewritten by the next money company. Yes?
As an angel or VC or an entrepreneur, is there a market for equity outside of part of the business? So for
Generally, no. No. When I'm investing in your company or any of your companies as a startup, my only chance to turn that share of your business into money is when you turn the business into money through either selling out to a larger firm or an IPO or something else. Typically, it's going to be 90% of the startups we invest in are going to be bought by some larger company at some point in the future. If they're wildly successful, someone will want to buy them. Only at that point will I ever be able to turn that share back into money for me. So it's a really illiquid long-term engagement that you have with those investors. There are some nuances where there's a secondary market for certain kinds of companies, but generally the answer is no. And the Securities and Exchange Commission is tamping down. They're determining the market conditions, and they generally are keeping it something uncertain.
It's almost like conflict of interest, right? You want an entrepreneur who wants to take it for the long haul, but there has to be some liquidity.
But keep your options open, because
Yeah.
as investors, we want to turn that share, that equity holding back into cash at some point.
Yeah.
And earlier is better than later, all things being equal.
Okay.
If later is going to be 10 times more than now, we'll wait. But if later is going to be the same price as now, we want it now.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom?
Perhaps a little on the side, but you mentioned 90% of companies are acquired.
Yes.
In-
I understated 98% of companies are acquired.
Okay. How does one evaluate the price at which you will be sold 5 years prior to justify?
Well, we look at comparable companies. So in your sector, if it's, ag robotics, for example, we look at other companies that were in the ag robotics space that got purchased. And they got purchased at a multiple of revenue, or some multiple of something. I mean, there's some way to compare. Often it's multiple of revenue for companies that are actually post-launch in commercial production. And those multiples can be 2x, 3x, 10x revenues. So if you project that your business is going to be $2 million of revenue in 5 years, and the market valuation is 10x for ag robotics companies, that gives you kind of a target exit valuation of whatever that number is. So, and almost in every sector, in every industry, there have been other companies that were acquired before yours. When we make investments as angel investors, we look at what were the comparable exits in your sector for other companies, what were the measures, the multiples that would allow us to judge, what could your business be worth at some point. Again, that's all available publicly, Crunchbase and others, frequently others kinds of numbers. Sometimes it's not as easy to get public traded information, but if you're bought by a public traded company, then typically they disclose certain things if it's material to the business. So you can learn a lot from looking at publicly traded companies, end of the year earnings reports and things, their annual reports. I've done it. Anti-dilution provisions are other things, again, to prevent leakage. I won't go into those because we're running short of time. Convertible debt is somewhat simpler. Again, I didn't mention this, but a typical stock purchase agreement has about 4 or 5 different agreements that come along with it. So there's a lot of paperwork. It's not a bad thing, it's just a lot of paperwork. There's a stock purchase agreement, there's a shareholder rights agreement that talks about all these rights and preferences. There's a shareholder voting rights agreement, which is a separate document. And there's a first right of refusal and co-sale, typically, that says if I'm an investor and you're going to have the next round of stock investments, I have my pro rata rights to be able to purchase shares. The stock purchase agreement is important. The stock purchase agreement is your assertion as the entrepreneur. You make all these disclaimers that you disclose all the information that you know about the company, that you are not subject to legal litigation at this point in time. You're basically making a bunch of claims that if those claims turn out not to be true, the shareholders that are purchasing in this round can come back and sue you for it. So shareholders care a lot about the stock purchase agreement. It assures us that your PowerPoint slide and you were not lying to us when you came and made your pitch. So know that now. Don't do it. Because sooner or later, it will come to light. And if you've made claims in a legal document that were untrue, no lawyer in the world is going to protect you. In the convertible note terms, it's a very simple document. It's typically a promissory note, similar to when you sign a mortgage for your house or whatever. If you bought a house, again, it's a multi-page legal document, but it basically says, I'm going to give you money, you promise to repay it with the following terms and conditions. Those terms and conditions are things like interest rate, term, and expiration date. It might be a 2-year note, so at the end of 2 years, something happens. It doesn't just go on forever. There's a conversion. If it's a convertible note, it would convert into equity. The trigger might be a financing threshold. If you raise a price equity round of $2 million or something within that period of the expiration date, then it will convert. There might be a valuation discount upon conversion. Again, valuation means that pre-money that defines what the price per share is, et cetera, et cetera. Warrants could be an incentive if offered. Conversion valuation cap. Valuation cap is nice because it gives that investor some assurance where they make money when they buy shares at this price and sell them for more. Valuation cap says, I'm giving you money now to raise your equity price, but when it converts to shares, I know that I won't be paying more than X for those shares. The question is, can that valuation cap survive the next round of financing, or will those next investors say, by the way, we've done the valuation caps in the previous round? Again, frequently it's waived by the next round. They just basically write it out, say, I won't invest unless you go back to those note holders and ask them to waive their right of getting a conversion discount. I've seen it multiple times. So, as an investor, it's like, wait, I got these wonderful terms, but if they're too wonderful, they won't survive the next financing round. They'll need to bring me out of the contract. I'm holding a note in a company that if they don't get the financing, will fail. So guess what? I'm going to say, yes, it's okay to take away my rights and my privileges as an investor. Because I want the company to get financed, I want the company to be successful. It's the only way I can get money out. So I'll do it. Conversion upon expiration. So if it's a 2-year note and nothing happens, they don't have a financing round, 2 years comes up, then what happens? It might convert at some price, it might not convert, maybe I have the right to get the money back. But typically I take the money back from the company's spent the money. That's why they're raising it. They can raise it to the bank and give me back 2 years later. They raised it and spend it. So about all it can do at the end is convert. But then the question is to convert what else? So I mentioned earlier that I could give you some data. This was data from 2017, so it's about a year old. It's from the Angel Resource Institute, which is part of the Angel Capital Association. They've done an annual report for the last 5 or 8 years. They looked at what's the typical pre-money valuation for first money in the first round angel deals. And the median, again, the median is the midpoint, 50 percentile. You might see a lot of valuation much, much lower. You might see a lot of valuation much, much higher, but the 50 percentile point, the median, was $3.5 million. That figure has gone up and down. 2015 must have been a heck of a year for venture, for entrepreneurs, for venture investors. They were kind of feeling generous, but things have kind of quieted down. Now it's about 3.5. 5 years ago it was 2. So it's not really changed much. Lots of entrepreneurs have raised money, $2.5 million free, and they've gone on to wonderful things. 5 years later, other entrepreneurs are raising money, and their initial money is at about a $3.5 million valuation. Doesn't mean it's the same company. It means that these are, as people go through that stage of evolution. About 60% were preferred stock, 38% convertible notes, 2% were safes. And this is for California specifically, so it's very focused on our region. In other regions of the country, safes were 0%. So that's the Y Combinator. Safes are not taking over the world in any sense. Again, it's mostly Y Combinator and there's coming out of that program. From an angel standpoint, we prefer preferred stock, price rounds. I know Moneta is frequently taking companies that we've seen at the angel level, asking or offering a convertible note, and Moneta has come back and said, make that price round, we're in, and the entrepreneurs convert. So Moneta certainly prefers preferred stock. Most venture firms will only invest in preferred stock, because again, they want to make sure that they've got the investor protections, the tax benefits, the other liquidation preferences you get for price for stock offering. I've used up most of your evening, I apologize for that. Has this been useful? Yeah. We've got a great book, is Business Model Generation. It's not about finance, it's about running your business. Another book that's a companion to that is The Startup Understanding from Steve Blank. He uses the business model canvas in this book, so the two are a good combination, they complement each other. The last thing on your table, you've got a startup grind form. If you just fill it out before you leave, it helps Laura, Rich, myself understand, we give you the right to learn information. Too much, too little, not enough of this, too much of that. Just fill it out, leave it on your desk, or anything you want.
Any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
Would you recommend have a particular vertical market that should be on the product that I'm using out there?
Exclusivity. As a customer.
Like that, on that product that
Sure.
and then investors will still
Exclusivity is a tool. It's a working tool.
right.
And you need to use that tool, just like any sharp object, in a safe and responsible manner. But yeah, it can be wonderful. Exclusivity can be time-based, it can be geography-based,
Right.
it can be application-based. I mean, there's many different ways you can use that tool. It doesn't rule anything out from an investment standpoint. As an investor, I look at you as the entrepreneur. and said, you've used this powerful tool and used it well. It tells me about you as an entrepreneur. Be thoughtful. But no, if you've got a customer that likes your product so much they want exclusivity, there's a signal there. If you give away exclusivity, global, worldwide, non, fully paid up exclusivity, well, what business is left? So, so use that tool carefully. Other questions on any topic? Yes.
For Jake and I, we were able to raise some money a few years ago, and our biggest challenge was pre-seed, pre-valuation. Any recommendations or favorite resources on figuring out how much your work when you get that little critical first valuation?
The investors will figure out how much you work. It's good for you to have a starting point,
Yeah.
but however much time you spend on figuring out your pre-money valuation in your mind will be discounted by the investor. They'll figure out in their mind what you're worth.
And
that's
it's
what
interesting because we did see a lot of different ranges. I mean,
What's useful to spend your time on is finding comparables. Comparable companies at the same stage of market of investment readiness, in a similar space or domain, similar types of customer or market or customer market product, but yours is of course different. But comparables are useful because that educates the investor. But if you walk in and say, my pre-money is $3.5 million, it goes in one ear and out the other. I look at your business and say, well, what I pay for this business? Because, it's in the eye of people. And the person who has the money is the one who's going to decide if a valuation fits or doesn't fit.
And you said the angel networks will share with each other, so.
We share,
Well,
yeah.
Zach gave us.
Yeah, so beware among that circle of angel groups. If you're mistreating one angel group, or you're not honest with them, or I can tell you stories. It gets around. It gets around. I'll tell you a quick story. I was on the selections committee, and I had a group apply to our group. And on their management team, they had, so-and-so went to Wharton Business School and whatever. So I went on LinkedIn. So in their profile on LinkedIn said, he had a bachelor's in engineering from Michigan, University of Michigan, which is good. And he had gone to a 5-day, 1-week seminar sponsored by some group that was not Wharton Business School, but it was on the Wharton campus. But on the slide deck, he didn't mention that he had an engineering degree from University of Michigan. He mentioned Wharton Business School. I mean, I was thinking of that, right? Your integrity has only one shot, right?
Yep.
If you're not being honest with me, and not me personally, but with the angel group, I was the selections lead, we were reviewing these things. If you're not being honest with us on that, what else are you learning this about?
Yep.
I won't talk about current politics or anything like that. Don't go there, but if you're lying to me here, you're lying to me somewhere else. And this was obvious for me to find. I don't even want to spend the time finding the other obvious lies. It's just like, okay, next. And we went on. We've got 50 applications. I'm not going to spend more time than I need to discard one of those 50 and get down to, now we're only at 49 to week. So, we're digressing. Question in the back?
My question is about convertible notes.
Yes.
Because since you started pre-evaluation, you don't know what it is, how could you give that much equity early on? So is it more convertible notes early on, and then you kind of go into equity rounds afterwards?
Well, I've never seen a situation where someone raised a second round and then went with a convertible note. The convertible note is a way of postponing that initial valuation decision until the company now has enough track record or traction or to get a valuation. But once there's a valuation that's defined, again, most investors will say, well, at least we have that valuation. Are you worth more now than your post money in the previous round? If not, why not? And if you are, well, how much more? So once you go into a price record round, you tend to stay in after the name.
Okay.
Here's the challenge for me from a convertible standpoint. I'm going to give you money to raise your valuation, and then it's going to convert, and my share price is going to be that higher converted price. Well, I gave you the money to increase your valuation, and then my share price is based on the higher valuation. My incentive, I feel like I'm either being mistreated or my incentives are wrong. If I give you money on a convertible note, my incentive is that you convert at the lowest possible valuation, because then I'll get the most shares for the money I already put in, right? I already gave you mine, whatever, 100,000. And then it'll convert. So I want you to have the lowest conversion price possible so I get the most shares. That's in my best interest, right? Yours as an entrepreneur is to raise your valuation in your business. You want to raise your valuation each financing round you go. So convertible note creates a situation where my incentives and yours are not aligned. If I put in money in a priced equity round at this valuation, and it's a fair valuation, and you use that money to now raise your valuation, you win, I win, our interests are aligned. So it's really in our best interest for you to have your investors and you all on the same page. You know, where you're going is the right direction to go. Now, what I said about convertible notes, investors who are giving you money in a convertible note don't really, truly want your valuation to be low in the next financing round. They wouldn't give you the money if they felt it was going to be low. They're giving you the money to grow your business, but we're also thinking of paying on, you know, and if you're really successful, I'm going to get, you know, taken in the neck. Okay, valuation. Which is why we focus on valuation caps.
Right.
I've never invested in a convertible note that was uncapped. There's always a valuation cap. And ideally, I'd like the valuation cap to reflect what your current valuation is pre-money.
Right.
That rarely happens in convertible notes. Usually they take, well, my business probably, honestly, is worth $400,000 or $1 million or whatever, and I want a valuation cap on my note to be $3 million. You know, it's aspirational. And again, as investors, sometimes we'll stick, you know, we'll hold our nose and walk in and hit the check. But, you know, we don't.
Thank you.
In a price round, it's not an aspirational value that in 3 years you'll be worth $3 million. If you're worth $1 million now, that's the pre-money for your equity round right now. And again, from there on, your interests and mine are aligned. And these convertible notes, I'm just sharing you my personal observations. Convertible notes, valuation caps tend to be more aspirational than real here and now. When you get to price equity rounds, the valuation is real here and now. This is what you're worth. This is what I'm willing to put in as an investor. And it might be painful for you to, as an entrepreneur, to feel like your baby is somehow being valued inappropriately because expectations sometimes differ between the investor and entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, then you get aligned with your investor, and the investor is right there with you, helping you to do everything you can to raise that share price for the next round, to get to the next milestone, the next proof of traction with customers that's going to create more valuation in the next round.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
You see a lot of early stage venture funds focusing on differentiating themselves because they're just becoming a lot more today. What would you consider the assigning those differentiating?
We're here local. So in the Bay Area, there's a lot of different angel groups and venture groups that have different affinities. You know, in that slide I showed you, there was a Berkeley Angels that focuses around mostly Berkeley and UC Berkeley alumni. There's a Stanford Angels entrepreneurs. There's a Harvard Business School Angels that focus on Harvard alumni. There's an MIT Angels as well. There's an MIT alumni, and it's a big active group in the Bay. And so they're more kind of focused on an affinity or a vertical. There's the Indus Angels, which is mostly Indian, South Asian entrepreneurs. I mean, there's very, very specific focus stuff. Here in the Sacramento region, we're more generic. We're focused on the Sacramento region. We represent a set of angels that have come together more geographically focused. We don't invest exclusively geographically focused. We invest across mostly Northern California and a handful of scattering elsewhere. But we have a preference for local Sacramento firms. And because we're here, you know, we don't just write checks, we mentor and we coach and we step in. I've done data analysis for companies we've invested in, you know, helping them with their next round, financing, those kinds of things. And so we're here, we're local, we can provide more than hands-on coaching. If it's a Bay Area company coming here for money, I mean, the coaching is not going to be as real hands-on in the present. But we've done that as well. You know, some of our members are coaching and working closely with entrepreneurs who are located in Sunnyvale and Seneca and elsewhere, helping grow their business. So we're not exclusive to the region, but we do have we give you an extra oomph, you know, to get to pitch to our angels and to make a case. Yes, and Mike, can I answer your question? Because you had your hand up like
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, why not? Yes, great.
When you think of founder ownership percentage issues, is that something that...
Between and among founders?
Yeah.
Well, you got to figure that out before you come to angel investors. Because the last thing we want, again, one big risk is management team risk. If the founders don't have an agreement among themselves as to how they're going to share equity, before we get in, you know, we'll say, come back when you're ready. So we'll figure it out, and then, you know, let's talk.
And how about in totality as a percent of the company?
It's all dependent on what's the pre-money valuation, how much you're raising. You know, we don't come in with a fixed expectation. And, you know, I have to, as angels, each of us, as an individual angel investor, are writing small checks. In a group, we'd add up to maybe $200,000, but we're each writing checks for 10, 15, 20, 25,000. We're never going to be, as an individual, big in your cap table. You know, I will never be able to come and say, I will take, give you this, 30% of your company, because I'm going to get 0.30%. It's going to be a fractional single percent myself. And every other angel is also writing small checks. It's going to have that small percentage. So we never come in and say, we want 30% of the company. That's Shark Tank, that's TV entertainment. We actually invested in a company that was on Shark Tank. They were coming through the angel round at the same time as they were on Shark Tank, and they had filmed the Shark Tank episode before we decided to make our investment. And it was already filmed, canned, whatever. And then we decided to make our investment. We made our investment. We circled back with the entrepreneur. Did they ever have, well, we saw the episode of TV, and I think Mark Cuban committed to invest. Well, we asked the entrepreneur almost a year later, so whatever it became of it, as well, we still haven't closed the money from Mark Cuban. I mean, what happens in that 10-minute episode when they're pitching Shark Tank is...
It's entertainment.
It's entertainment. It's not really...
Was that Rapid Robin?
Pardon?
Was that Rapid Robin? Rapid Brands?
No, it was a bicycle with new wheels.
Oh, the wheel thing, okay.
Can't call the name on top of it. The brand is much. Yeah, brand.
To follow on his question, I think I have heard some people express inequality. If one founder has more and others have less, could the team pull together in the boat on yours?
There's a great book called The Founder's Dilemmas, and it talks specifically about how do you figure out how you allocate, because some founders have invested a lot, some invested a little in getting the business off the ground. This is all in your slide deck, so you don't have to write it down. Just circle it in your slide. It's like someone writing it down. Come on, get a slide deck.
It's a great segue. I'm not putting off questions, but on Wednesday at noon, Startup SAC has a lunchtime seminar with Michelle Rowe Halston, who happens to be a SAC angel and do work for the SAC angel. She's an attorney. But it's called Avoiding the Top 10 Legal Mistakes Startup Companies Made. And one of the things that she's going to talk about is founder agreements and equity distribution among co-founders and service folks.
It's one of the pitfalls that can sink a startup.
Yeah.
Is that tomorrow?
It's next Wednesday, the 17th. So if you go to the startupstack.org website or look in the Startup Digest, it's in there, or ask me afterwards. I can direct you.
So I didn't mean to cut you off. Your question it's something that you need to work out. There's many nuances to how you figure that out. One thing angels will ask is they will ask to see the cap table. And one thing that's a flag to us is if you initially had 3 founders and you divided the company 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and then one of them left, but he still has 1/3 of the stock. You'll ask questions about, why is that? Why didn't you have some sort of vesting or repurchase agreement or something else when you initially founded the company and decided on that split? Because the last thing we want is some big chunk of equity to be sitting there and somebody's absent, not investing anything in the company, and here you are, 24/7 investing sweat equity and making the company, into something, and you're not getting any more compensation than this guy who's absentee, or gal, or whoever, who's absentee. That's not fair. And we want our entrepreneurs to be motivated and incented as much as they can, where they feel that when the company's successful, they can be successful as well. If there's a whole chunk of equity that's off somewhere else, and you've got 10%, well, what's left in it for you? And then you're raising money from us, which is going to further dilute your 10%. It's not going to win for any of us, right? So we'll ask questions about your cap table, and if there's absentees there, we're going to ask a lot of detailed questions. And our term sheet might come back to you and say, we're willing to invest if you fix the following things. The analogy I've used many times is, you're at a picnic with your family, you got a box of chocolates, and suddenly the dog runs by and the chocolates are dumped over in the grass. And you pick this chocolate truffle out of the grass, and it's got dog hair, leaf bits, and everything else. And you got, as angel investors, we're constantly picking the dog hair off of deals and deciding is what's left, attractive enough for us to want to talk in our mouth. And there's never a perfect deal that doesn't have some dog hair sitting there. But the term sheet so we've helped negotiate deals. There was a deal we did with North Bay Angels, Berkeley Angels, and Sacramento Angels. The founder founders had not paid themselves salary for 2 years, but had a $300,000 unpaid salary, on the balance sheet as current debt, not as long-term debt. It's just, a payable. And they were raising about $300,000 from us as angel investors. So we can easily see, we were talking about leakage earlier, we would put $300,000 in, and the founders would pay themselves the $300,000 of unpaid salary, and there'd be no money. The money would not be in business. It would not help grow the value of the business. It would just line their pockets. So we asked them, that was one of several things. They had also, they were going to, expectation was they were going to hire a CEO, but they didn't have enough money in their option pool to compensate their CEO. And if you recall back in our slide examples here, we talked about the option pool. This is how you pay the future CEO or the future employees you're going to bring in, right? When they didn't have 18%, they had like 6% left. If you're going to hire, a powerful CEO, you're going to want to offer them some sort of equity deal where you say, give you 10% equity if you come and help make this business work. Well, we said, you need to up your option pool. You need to write down that that payable to the founding CEO and second in command as long-term debt to be paid out of customer revenue, not out of investor cash coming in. And we'll invest. And they had raised money already from previous investors, which means writing up the option pool, increasing that, would put more shares. This number would change from 8 million to 9 million or something, and they would have to update the amount of shares going to the other investors already invested. But we were willing to close, we were willing to commit the $170,000 or whatever it would take to close the round, because we had ourselves, North Bay Angels, and Berkeley Angels together. We negotiated this. We said, we all kind of like the deal, but it's got this dog here. How do we get rid of that? So we came back to them and made that offer, and they said, yes, if you're willing to commit. We said, we're willing to commit. They took care of that. They took care of the debt. They took care of the option pool. We wrote them a check. And, everyone's happy. But most deals are like that. Most deals wind up having something that we need to resolve. That's why we do our due diligence. We ask the questions. We want to see your investor documents. We want to see your articles of incorporation. We want to see what your cap table looks like, what your debt and balance sheet look like. And, be honest with us, we'll help you fix the things that are broken. Because it doesn't do us any good, it doesn't do you any good if they're still broke. We'll help you fix it.
So we do a last question with John.
Just from a timeline standpoint, from meeting to closing, what would you, right?
Entrepreneurs can absolutely accelerate that. It can take up to 6 months if the entrepreneur doesn't have all their documents in order.
Yeah.
If we ask you for things and it's 3 weeks before you come back to us and say, oh, by the way, I don't have that, and you don't get that, it's another 3 weeks before you get that document. Some entrepreneurs, especially ones that are already into their financing, already have a data room set up where they have all their contracts and agreements, all their intellectual property contracts with their employees, all of their partner agreements, distribution agreements that they have, whatever, already scanned, PDF copies available on a Dropbox for us to review. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Often they didn't start that way, but they started talking to some investors, and those investors kind of beat them into having all that, and they come to us and they've already got it well documented. They look really professional, but we know that they get started. But it's great because it accelerates the time to getting to resolution. There's no fixed timeline.
Right.
We've had deals that are about to close. They're raising $800,000. They've already got $600,000 in the bank, and they're just closing out the last $200,000 and getting all their documents in order. It goes really quickly.
Yeah.
Others where they come to us first and they've never really put all that stuff together, it can drag on forever. And it's
Would
really
you say really quickly is about 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah, 2 or 3. Do not start raising money a month before your current runway, your runway burns up. Start raising when you have about 6 months left, and it's probably too short. Because you'll find 4 months goes by, you're still having discussions, and then you look at 2 months left, and now you start this air of desperation in your voice, and it's not helpful for anybody.
Okay, so
All right.
Thank you